welcome to the Divorced Women's Guide podcast, where we talk about the things us divorcees are thinking, but not always talking about, as we turn our divorce into the best gift we've ever been given. And I do so with a little bit of sass and a whole lot of class. I am your host, Wendy Sterling, founder of the Divorce Rehab. I am here to support you in this transition phase of your life so you can start your new best chapter on your own terms. After all, that's what I did after my own divorce. And now it is my mission to change the conversation around divorce and help you see why your divorce, like mine, was the best gift you ever received. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Divorced Woman's Guide podcast. I am so excited that you've tuned in today because I am here with my dear friend, Dorcy Pruter. Hi, Dorcy. Welcome.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you.
Of course. I love talking to you, and I'm so excited that you are here today. And everyone, Dorcy and I are going to talk about how it is that you can start to heal from the complex trauma of your divorce. And before we dive in, I want to share a little bit more with you guys about Dorcy. Hopefully you guys saw Dorcy in the summit. And to refresh your memory, Dorcy is recognized as one of America's top reunification specialists. She's also a conscious co-parenting coach who teaches divorcing parents struggling with attachment-based parental alienation, how to reunite with their alienated children and resurface the bond that was obstructed. She teaches children how to be in relationship with both parents and delivers high-impact reunification strategies that inspire left-behind parents to take immediate action and restore the relationships with their children. And in just a few short years, Dorcy has created one of the world's leading co-parenting companies, the Conscious Co-Parenting Institute, to meet the needs of parents wherever it is that they are in their divorce process. Dorcy, you are like the jack of all trades. I mean, you have your hands in so many different things, and you know, the work that you've been doing for so many years, and, you know, you and I have had so many conversations about eye-opening things you've said that have awoken me to so many different things I wasn't conscious of, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you're here today to talk about something that's really important that a lot of people are dealing with today, which is the trauma of divorce. And I would love for you to share more with our audience around, you know, how do you define that? What is that exactly?
Excellent. So trauma or divorce trauma can be experienced, or usually is experienced, in many different levels. So not just emotionally, but also physically, spiritually, relationally. So when we have a breakup or a divorce, or even a betrayal in a friendship or a relationship, we're triggered into our our trauma of a limiting belief we have, which is separateness. So as humans, we believe we're actually separate, but the truth is we're all actually connected. And the trauma actually starts in our early childhood, and the separation that is created in our birth experience. And then as we start to mature, we start to experience separation from our parents around 2 years old, when I can do it myself, or 3, right? And as we start to mature in our human consciousness, we create separation, and then at that same time, we're creating a belief that we're separate, but the truth is we're really not. And so we start to create a negative story about being disconnected or separate. And when we go through a breakup or a divorce, we get triggered into an emotional trauma that is started in our childhood, a belief that we believe that something bad is happening to us. And if we've ever experienced breakups like our first love in middle school or high school, every time we experience a breakup, we are re-stimulated into the same trauma that we never really healed from our childhood. And so it sort of compounds on top of each other. And so if we have a big breakup, a divorce, we're traumatized frequently, and when we go into our trauma brain, we start to spin in our unconscious mindset. So we flood our body with cortisol, and we are unable to access our thinking or logical side of our brain. And so what a lot of times happens when, especially for women, because we are more emotional than men, naturally, when we go through a divorce or a divorce process, we have a hard time recovering because we're constantly being re-stimulated from our childhood trauma. And so one of the things that we teach at the Institute is how do you heal those, I call them micro traumas that keep compounding one by one in this big trauma. And one of the things I teach people is to learn how to source and process. So sourcing and processing is having a understanding or a sourcing of when was the first time you experienced the belief or the separation trauma, and that you can remember. So most people say, oh, I can't remember my birth experience, or I can't remember before the age of 5 or whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. Remember what, or source and process what you can remember.
Well,
Does it make sense?
Totally. And I've
Yeah.
actually heard that a lot of times it's that age range between 0 to 8 is when that first, when you were first given that experience, right? Where that
Yes.
experience happened for you for the first time, that then molded you for the rest of your life.
Right. Creates your story or your narrative,
Yes.
if you will. And we're always operating from 2 levels of our consciousness, higher and lower self. And higher self is our love consciousness connected to God, source, universe, whatever you believe, right? So where we're operating from our love consciousness, and then lower self is our fear consciousness. And that gets programmed in the first 3 years of life. And so we experience our events in life through both filters, but we most of the time pay attention to our lower self filter. It's our victim mindset. It's the part of us that believes that we're a victim, and that we need to be victimized. And so we create narrative early on, and we usually are processing our life through our 3-year-old self. Even though we may be intellectual and intelligent, all of these things, our emotional self may be processing as a 3-year-old. And I also like to remind people that we also have a middle self, which is our filter. It's the brain, of which higher and lower is coming in at the same time. But we're not usually paying attention to the higher self, which is like your intuition, like, hey, this is happening for this reason. There's an opportunity to clean it up. So when we experience a divorce, we go into our victim mindset. Even if we're the ones wanting the divorce, we still do it. Like, even if we initiate the divorce, we still want to be the victim of it. Well, they were a bad spouse, or they were abusive, or they were terrible, or whatever, they were,
or I'm going to ruin my kids' lives, or
I'm going to ruin my kids' lives. Exactly. We go round and round and round. And secretly, all of that comes from our unworthiness. So a belief that we're not worthy of love, acceptance, connectedness. We believe deep down in our unconscious mind, where we spin, right, that we're unworthy of being connected to all that is and all that is good. And it starts from things that we do in our early childhood. I call them FBAs, or fear-based actions. So little things that we do where we drop into our lower self-consciousness, and we believe we have no other choice but to act or react a certain way. And then we have this moment of higher self that says, hey, we can clean that up right now. But we
ignore it, right?
Ignore that. And then we go into our lower self like, well, no, I had to kick my sister because she stole my Legos, or something stupid like that, right? So we create this narrative, and then we're always trying to wake up to our story, but we ignore it. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and louder and louder and louder, until we make a decision to source and process and clean it up. And the processing is really easy. It's just sourcing what it is. And then the process is, what is the story that you created about yourself, life, and others that's holding you stuck in this pattern of behavior, if you will, over and over and over again. And sometimes it's really hard to connect the dots. So people don't see that something they did as a small person is impacting how they're showing up as a grown-up, or even as a parent. that's a lot of what we teach in conscious co-parenting is we have children because of our unconscious parts. We're trying to heal and wake up to our unconscious parts from our childhood. And, but our high and mighty adult selves don't really want to that, we're like, no, we're superior and we know more. And while that's true in a lot of ways, it's not true in a lot of ways, especially from a consciousness perspective. Our children are teaching us to wake up, but it's hard to wake up. It's hard to become conscious. As you know, it's hard.
It is. Well, and I think that, I can say from my own experience, I think I was super unconscious for most of my married life. And it wasn't until, the 2x4 smacked me upside the head that I finally became conscious to what was my life and what I allowed to come to fruition. And as you said, I mean, it goes back so far in, my childhood. And I know exactly the moment that, I lost my voice and I lost my identity and, and I brought that into my marriage. And, I think that people also make a lot of mistakes in trying, I call them almost like, it's like people look to quick fixes, right? Because it's that, it's like almost like people who are addicted to something, right? It's like you need that quick fix just to stop feeling, right? To numb or, right? But that doesn't work. So what are some of the mistakes that you often see people make when they're trying to heal themselves of this trauma?
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they believe they've forgiven their ex, or they believe that they don't need to forgive, that they've just simply moved on. And so they're trying to, like you say, brush over or numb the pain, and nothing can ever be suppressed. So again, it's just going to keep bubbling up. And so a lot of people misunderstand what forgiveness actually is. And forgiveness isn't about the other person. Forgiveness is about yourself. And forgiveness for and the more esoteric version of forgiveness is not even necessary, because everything in your life is a manifestation of what you believe you deserve, and you created it anyways. So when you get to that place, you're like, oh, this was all predestined or designed by me in order to wake up and become conscious anyways. But that's a big leap for a lot of people, and forgiveness is a nice step for people to really understand. But most people have no idea what forgiveness actually is. And it is about healing your own inner child, if you will, or the wounds that your inner child is holding on to. And forgiveness is about being free or creating freedom for yourself. And it's not about the other person. And it's really hard for people to wrap their mind around that, because they feel betrayed, or the other person is doing something to them or has done something to them. And they hold on to that pain. And the greatest gift you can give yourself and your children in that process is to realize that you're in charge and you're in the driver's seat, and you chose the person that you were in relationship with, whatever that looks like. And when you can put yourself back in the role of responsibility, then responsibility is different than blame. So if somebody's like, you're blaming me for what's happened to me, it's like, it's not blame. Blame is lower self. Responsibility is higher self, to say, I made choices in my life to be in the situation I'm in. In order for me to heal and grow, I must take responsibility for those choices, and to put myself in the position of which I was in to manifest those things in my life for those people. And when you forgive yourself and you say, I take responsibility, that's really the first step in forgiveness, is I own that. Freedom lies there. And the biggest mistake I see people making is not doing that, is really holding on to the fact that I can't let go of this, because if I let go, then the other person is right. I'm giving them a free pass. And really, when you don't let go of that narrative, you're actually giving them real estate in your emotional brain and in your physical body and in your spiritual being. So how much time are you and real estate are you willing to give that negative energy? And the moment you say enough and I'm responsible, then you're actually letting go or really transforming, because lower self doesn't like to let go. Lower self likes to hold on, even if
For
it feels
dear
bad,
life.
I'm going to hang on to that, right? But you actually are transforming. And I've watched women that I've coached, like, just drop weight when they've gone through a process. We teach a process called higher purpose mastery or higher purpose parenting. And we really go deep in these processes. And I've watched women like transform physically, like right before my eyes almost. It's like, wow, what are you doing differently? And they're actually going through the deeper lessons of forgiveness and really understanding the layers of their trauma, and how when they go back to that initial point of which they created the story of the little micro traumas and they transform that, it kind of goes all the way through, and it makes it so much easier. And it's really challenging until it isn't. And then all of a sudden it's super easy and you just start doing it in the moment,
Yeah. And
like you have to have sheets or worksheets and stuff.
hey, it's Wendy. I wanted to take a quick break from the conversation to say thank you for listening and to also share something really exciting that I am launching on June 9th. So I am putting together another free online summit called Beyond Divorce: Discover the Secrets to Disconnect, Set Boundaries, and Move Forward. So if you're somebody who's thinking about, or perhaps you're in the process of divorce, or even on the other side, and you're feeling stuck because the courts are closed and you think that you can't move forward, well, I'm here to tell you that that is just not true. The goal of this summit is to support you and to help you navigate the emotional side that you are currently struggling with. I'm interviewing over 33 experts about how to support your kids, how to set boundaries, co-parenting with a narcissist, how to practice self-compassion, how to be financially independent, conscious co-parenting, how to stay healthy, and so much more. I have had so many aha moments during all of these interviews, and I just know you will too. Oh, and by the way, each expert is providing a free gift just for you. So please visit beyonddivorcesummit.com to register for free. And now let's jump back into the conversation. But I think you're shedding light on something so important, which is that, a couple of things actually, is that the forgiveness process, I know people hear the word forgive and they're, immediately like, hell no, he's never, or she's never.
Exactly.
And it's not about them. And it's not even something that you ever need to communicate to them, right?
Exactly. Right.
It's about you forgiving yourself, right? And as I say, and I sometimes swear on my podcast, like, it's owning your shit. You've got to own and take responsibility for how you contributed, right, to how you showed up in the marriage. And that is something that I preach, and something, listen, it was so hard for me to have to look myself in the mirror and go, okay, I get to take responsibility for my half of the choices that I made. Now, I do not take responsibility for his choices. I do take them for mine. And you're right. The weight that gets lifted off of you when you finally even just verbalize it, you acknowledge, right? And a lot of people will say like, oh, that, you're just giving them power by saying it. And it actually takes the power away, right? By acknowledging it, by taking the responsibility. And I have to tell you, I literally just experienced this yesterday. So I was going to a doctor's appointment. I had melanoma about 5 years ago, and it was very hard for me to wrap my mind around, the word cancer. And thankfully it was caught early, it was removed, etc. But I had a trauma around that experience because my ex-husband was so checked out at that point that I really felt alone going through that. And I realized that I hadn't healed that part of me because every time I have to go to the dermatologist now every quarter for checkups, which is fine. I'd rather be safe than sorry. But I realized that I would get anxious. I didn't sleep well the night before. All these like feelings started getting stirred up. I was a wreck walking into the office until he gave me the clear. And it wasn't until I actually took responsibility for not calling him out on being so checked out when I was going through that. And I get to take responsibility for not standing in my voice and using it to say like, hey, you have to show up. Like you get to show up. You get to be here for me. You are my husband. And, you know, and it was such a relief. Literally, I just figured this out and did this yesterday, like no joke. And I'm 4 years, right? Post separation. But you shed something so important. And part of that was forgiving myself, right? For letting him, right? Letting him, there's the shoulding all over yourself, right?
Right.
But it was a matter of me having to take responsibility for not asking for what I needed and just assuming that he was going to figure it out. And so when we forgive ourselves for those traumas, like I now, like I think about it and I don't have an ounce of anxiety because I named it, right? And it was about me. It wasn't about him. I didn't have to call him. I didn't have to share anything with him. It was me.
Right. So you can actually go deeper. Believe it or not, there's actually deeper work for you to do in that, around that. So if you so choose, and anybody listening, because there's a reason this is happening right now, right? It's just for you and also others in the same situation, is how much deeper can you go? There's actually another layer or several layers. There's so much depth to what you're talking about. You just sourced and processed an incident, right, that you were experiencing, and then you were able to go back to say, in your marriage, when did I feel this, and what can I take responsibility for? You can actually go even further back now and say, when was the first time I experienced not being supported and not using my voice to be able to ask for support? And this is a really big thing for a lot of women, especially, is that we lose our voice, especially strong women in relationship, because maybe we were raised by women who say, you don't need a man, or you can do it all yourself, or whatever our story is, right? And so we start to live that out, and we marry somebody, and we forget or don't ever ask, because we don't know, to ask for the type of support that we need, and or help that we need. And then we blame the other person because they're not there for us, and we don't realize that they're just simply showing up in the mirror of what it is that we are energetically asking for. So we're energetically putting out, I don't need you to do this for me. I'm a big girl. I can take care of my own emotions. I can take care of myself. I can do this. I can do that. La, 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 because we've been conditioned by the women in our lives, our mother, maybe our grandmother, society, the things that are happening for women. This pendulum swung so far in the equality, right? That we need to do everything, and we can do all this stuff. And we have lost our way in what it is that we know that we deserve in our unconsciousness, right? Our little lower self, if you will, our inner child is screaming. Our little girls are asking for this, and our little boys too. But for women especially, our pendulum is swung so far the other way. And so for you and anybody listening, there's an opportunity to go deeper, to say, where did I lose my way? When was the first time my voice was suppressed, right? When was the first time my voice around asking for support? And it could be something so simple as, asking for something from a parent and them saying, leave me alone, or, you can figure that out. Or it's those little things that we do unconsciously that the little person in us is our wounded child, and we create our trauma story, and round and round and round we go. So I, first of all, I honor you for being on the journey that you're on, and for being able to even recognize that immediately. And yesterday, wow, I mean, so timely, this podcast, right?
I know, right? And it's funny because I actually, I know exactly when I was a child that happened. I know the exact moment. And it's interesting because, and I think this is a great point for everybody, is that, it's not a matter of things just don't hurt anymore, right? Things will continue to come up, but it's when you do the work, right? You're able to not only recognize it, but you're able to recover faster because you've got the toolkit and the questions to ask yourself, or, like you just said, it's something earlier. And yes, it is. And I know the exact moment. I know exactly when. And then I also can look back and also see a pattern, right? From that moment through my adulthood, and that's my, and interestingly enough, that was my through line, right? For my whole life. And it's fascinating when you become conscious to, your inner child. It's fascinating. I mean, it is this topic fascinates the crap out of me. I love your jargon. I love everything that you're saying because it's so incredibly true. And, I think that people don't necessarily understand that it's a process. Right? It's not just a quick fix, one and done. It is a process. It is a learning. It is like exercising a muscle, right?
Exactly.
It's not like your courses are a day and then people are off and perfect in the world, right?
Wouldn't that be awesome? It'd be awesome.
I say all the time, I'm like, if there was a magic pill, I would manufacture, trademark, and market the crap out of it and be like, there you go, pop the pill, you're done.
Exactly.
Right. But then that takes the fun out of it.
That takes the fun out of it. And one of the things I think people do in this process too is they'll source, right? They'll know exactly when it is, and then they'll forget the actual process. And the process is simple, and I always tell people, write it out. Because your lower self, they're going to try and trick you, right, into thinking you've done enough. And so what did you create? What's the story you created in your mind in that moment about yourself, about life, and about others? And mostly about yourself. And because we start to write the narrative that we deserve bad things, and we manifest what I call decision forming incidents, or DFIs. They start rolling in like the waves of the ocean. The patterns of behavior you can see, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's the thread, it's all connected. And you have these moments every single time you have a decision forming incident, you have an opportunity to wake up. But our lower self says, oh hell no, I ain't waking up to that, I'm a victim. And then we bring it in again. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's like boom. And so when you're processing, it's like, what did I create? What's the story? And that's still not enough. You write it till it's all out. And then you may even need to go a little bit further back. So if the story is usually I cause men to be abusive or men to leave or whatever that is. And then is it further back? You can ask. And if you can't think of something further back or remember something further back, then write the negating truth. What's the actual truth? You don't cause men to leave. So what's the negating truth? And so it could be something like, I've attracted men in my life to wake up to this belief I have, and I do that no longer, right? Or I am a good person, or I am lovable, or I'm worthy of healthy relationships, right? So whatever is right for you. And so write until it feels good, and create some mantras around that. It's the thing with The Secret that they forget to tell people, which is, The Secret isn't like $1 million and writing a check and putting it on the mirror. And, you may manifest that $1 million, but if you don't believe you deserve it, you will get rid of it as fast as you get it. And ask me how I know, right? So, you need to process the story around the limiting belief. What is the negating truth, but what is the story that's preventing it from happening? So Same thing with relationship. You know, I want to be in relationship with beloved. I'm in relationship with beloved. Beloved is close to me, right? So if you're going through a divorce, or you've gone through this and now you're looking for beloved, you know, beloved is there. So believe that beloved is there, but look at yourself. What are you doing that's preventing beloved from actually showing up, manifesting in your life physically? Because he or she is there energetically, but what are you doing to keep the block, right? So it's the same thing, you know, money, relationship, love, connectedness, all of those things, all when we're holding things at bay, it's all energy. And so it's all based on our story. And we know we've truly healed, because most people say, can you help me heal? I'm like, I can teach you the tools you can heal yourself. And they're like, and then they go through a process and they're like, oh my God, you healed me. It's like, nope, I didn't heal you. I just taught you the steps. Ultimately, you have to do the work. And but when you know that little trauma or micro trauma that's become a massive trauma, and I don't want to say little and people think she doesn't understand. I mean, I've been through a lot of stuff. I get trauma. You know, but it starts with little micro traumas that become a macro. And when we're triggered in trauma, we're feeling all of the trauma in this one incident from all of the little micro traumas that lead up to the incident, right? So whatever, to the divorce, we're re-stimulated into our 8th grade breakup or our 5th grade breakup, or, you know, whatever, you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? Or your parents divorced, or somebody died in your childhood, or all of those things, those are all compounding. And then if you've had a lot of trauma, then a divorce is a macro trauma for you. You're re-stimulated in all of these little things. And if you haven't processed those, source them and process them, today's divorce feels insurmountable. It feels overwhelming. You get destabilized and depressed, and you really start spinning in the victim mindset, and you have a hard time seeing your pathway out because you're in a cortisol spin zone, right? So you know that you've moved through that and you've healed when you show up with gratitude, and when you can look at the situation and you can. And I'll tell you, this is an advanced skill. I'm going to go ahead and share it with you. And
Please.
The advanced skill is, if you look at the experience with your ex and you take responsibility for how he showed up. So earlier you said, I'm not going to take responsibility for his 50%. I'm going to take responsibility for mine. True forgiveness and healing and ownership says, I take responsibility for all of it.
Okay.
Everything. I'm 100% responsible 100% of the time. And in that space, you really, I've goosies. You really own the healing. You can move through with gratitude, and you can look at your ex or your child's other parent, and you can say, thank you. Because without you standing on the other side of the mirror, right, and doing this mirror dance with me, I would never have had the opportunity to learn this lesson. And I'm grateful. So I want to honor you for being where you are and who you are in the journey, and to be on this journey with me. And I release you from your side of the mirror, because I take responsibility for all of it. And then it's done. But you have to do that with authenticity. And that really only comes from a place of sourcing and processing the micro traumas that lead up to where your divorce or your separation or the betrayal is today. Does that make sense?
Total sense. And, you know, it's interesting. Like you totally just hit like something just like clicked in my head, which is that even when you are saying that you take 50% responsibility, you're still pointing a finger for that other 50, right? And I think it's really important, and I want to hone in on what you said, which is that you are source, period. You are source for your life and those that come in and out of it. And when you're taking responsibility, you're taking responsibility for your life. And that includes how your marriage fell apart or whatever it is. And you sourced that, period. And that, I think, is a huge disconnect that people have. and you explained it so beautifully and simply, that I just want to make sure that everybody heard you say that, because many times we are and stay in the finger pointing game, which to me is very much so tactic of a quick fix. Like, it's easier to just point the finger, like he did da, 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 right? And yet at the same time, you sourced it. You sourced him. I sourced my ex-husband wholeheartedly. I sourced how he showed up, right? And what I just had an aha moment about is that I know that, and I never connected that to the responsibility and the forgiveness piece ever.
Yeah. Ooh, goosies.
Goosies.
Yeah.
Like, no joke. And I'm like kind of having this like, come on, Wendy, like you should have known that. And it did, I don't know, the way you just said it, I'm like, oh, that, like, I don't know why that never clicked before, but it clicked for me. And I want it to click for everybody listening, because I think it's really important. And again, it's about you. It is about you. This isn't about him or her. It's not about your ex. It's about you.
Yeah.
That was really powerful. That was a really powerful point that I'm just like, oh my God, I never connected those two before. Seriously.
Wow. Well, that's so exciting.
It is exciting. And I know everybody listening is going to have like a little aha moment too, right? Around that. And, you know, you have shared so many wonderful pieces of advice and tips, and Dorcy, your knowledge is beyond comprehension of just how much you know and how much you help people with everything that you teach and all of the resources that you have available. And I just want to say a huge thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I know I want people to be able to get in touch with you. So please, well, first of all, is there anything else that we want to wrap this conversation up with? And then how can people get a hold of you?
Okay, so I want to let everybody know that if you're feeling triggered, because sometimes this heavy and this deep of a conversation will trigger people that are traumatized. And since we're talking about trauma, I'm thinking, wow, people are going to come and listen and they're going to be traumatized. And so if you're feeling triggered and you're feeling traumatized even by this conversation, because maybe you're just going through your divorce, or maybe you were cheated on, or all of those things, I don't know. But if you're feeling traumatized, or you're feeling like we don't understand, I can assure you that both Wendy and I have been there, and we do understand, and we've also been traumatized. And give yourself the space to heal. And trauma, when you're in traumatization or you're traumatized, it's going to be really hard to move past the triggers and listen and actually hear the messaging. So if you're actually triggered, then you need to hear this message more than anybody listening. It's really for you. And so we're going to give you a free process to actually overcome these trauma triggers, and especially from the divorce, which is just an event. Okay, so the divorce is a traumatic event that that you're stimulated in now. So if you're triggered, this is for you. This is for everyone. But if you're triggered, don't poo-poo this aside. When we're triggered, it's what we need to hear and learn the most. So if you're feeling triggered, don't go away. We do have a free gift for you. And what's it called? It's called Overcoming. What was it? Overcoming obstacles caused by your divorce trauma. So yeah, I was like, what is it called again? Yeah, that. And it's a step-by-step process to actually, we're going to give you the step-by-step on how to actually overcome this trigger that you're experiencing from your divorce trauma right now. So you can go to find out more about what we do, you can go to consciouscoparentinginstitute.com. And if you go to our programs, we have a ton of programs there. We also have resources with a ton of free resources. And then Wendy will give you the link for your special podcast guests so that they can get this free resource. And we're actually just launching a brand new class called Healing from the Emotional Trauma of Betrayal, Breakup, and Divorce. And we will give your podcast listeners $100 off. So the code will be DW Guide, and we'll give you the link. Where it's a brand new class, so the link isn't even up on our website yet. So we'll get that to you, and you can put the link in the podcast, and if they use the code, they'll get $100 off that class as well.
So incredibly generous, Dorcy. Thank you so much. And thank you for your wisdom and for being here today. You know, I love and adore you. I feel like we could continue to talk. We talked in the summit for an hour. I know we could keep going here for an hour. And I'm so grateful to know you and for you to be sharing your gifts with the world and helping so many people out there. Thank you so much for your generosity and for being here with me today.
Thank you, Wendy. Pleasure.
Of course. And everybody tuning in, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something amazing today. And, you know, you guys all heard me have a big aha moment here with connecting some dots that, you know, I knew were connected, but I didn't necessarily put them together the way that Dorcy did so eloquently today. So thank you all for tuning in. I can't wait to see you on my next episode. Sending you tons of love, light, and joy. Mwah. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorced Woman's Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this episode with someone you know or spread the word on social media. This is how I reach more divorcees around the world and provide them with the support they need to create their next best life. And I would also love to continue the conversation with you. So please friend me on Facebook, join my private Facebook group, The Divorce Rehab, and follow me on Instagram at Divorce Rehab with Wendy. I'll see you next time.